It is a good morning from Kampala. Today the weather is very nice. For the last 2 days I think we have been experiencing the terrible jams in the city. I don't know for whatever reason. Of course someone was telling me because Kampala has potholes. Potholes in Kampala are not new. So I don't think that is the reason. Of course we have been in the few days experiencing some rains. That could also explain. And sometimes you wonder why the connection between rain in Kampala and the jam. But I was told that because parking in Kampala is also a challenge, so people park their cars away from where they work from. So when it rains, moving from office to where you park, or from your workplace to where you park, and of course there's also this issue of parking in the roads. Maviris, one time we'll take someone to court because if the road has been demarcated for Mututa and the family, then that road becomes a personal road. So these are some of the issues that we have in Kampala. But anyway, Kampala is very good. The morning here is very shiny and very beautiful. As usual in the studio, I have my colleagues Ndugu Rugarama and Rachel, who will be talking to you. And I'm told later on we'll also have some people who will be joining us via the Zoom. The last 2 weeks, of course, the other week we had the Easter, then we came back. After Easter, then we had the Eid, and of course, normally when those days come, and if they happen to come on Fridays, because we have live streaming, live coverage of those events, sometimes we are not on set here. But of course, we knew that you are following us, even as we were off the screens for the 1 week, and then the other earlier week when we had Easter. We usually start our program with overview of the week, how it has been in the African context. And today we will spend much of the time, because last time we signed off, we had talked, we were talking about issues of religion, issues of faith, issues of Christianity, issues of Islam, religion and Islam, then the religion and Christianity, the differences and the commonalities. And we thought we would also carry on from where we had stopped. But of course, we also now look at the issues that, the developments that are taking place in the Sudan, our neighboring country here, to see what is happening on the African continent. We as Africans failing to handle our issues, or is the influence from outside of Africa becoming too much that we can no longer hold ourselves together, or is it the poor leadership or the poor administrative mechanisms that we have on the African continent that is failing our own development? Now, before we divulge into that, I will bring to you Ndugu Rugarama. Ndugu Rugarama, how has been your week?
Good morning, comrades. Good morning, Ndugu Mututa and Sister Takari Rachel here. The week, as the audience may remember, has been punctuated with those big holidays. We had, like you correctly observed, the other time, because we didn't even appear here, our programming was interrupted for very good reasons by the Eid al-Fitr, I think.
Yeah.
Celebrations, and our brothers and sisters, we congratulated them by making sure that that time was donated to covering their celebrations in all the mosques all over the country. And this being a national broadcaster, I think we were also picking from the rest of the outside the Ugandan territorial jurisdiction.
Sure, sure.
Then there was Easter around there, and the other half also was celebrating the, was it the death and the resurrection Jesus Christ. And, but apart from that, we have had the unfortunate occurrence, which at rather a very high and bigger magnitude, the events in Khartoum. I wouldn't want to say in Sudan, because the biggest concentration of the unfortunate unfoldings is in Khartoum.
Yeah, but of course there are even sporadic fights in other parts of
there
of
are
Sudan.
eruptions.
But we shall come back to that. That's the main discussion. I just want to tap into other parts of the week.
Yes, I thought I would just highlight that as well.
Yeah, because that's what we are going to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we have had the situation in this high debate now about the coming back of the President of the United States of America and his deputy, the issues of age being seriously debated, and of course looking at his deputy as having even taken over the presidency right from when the very current president, who is now 80 years, was coming into the presidency the other time. So basically, really, apart from that, of course, here on the local scene, we have had a lot of sentiments erupting here and there, and sometimes maybe correctly so, about the state of our roads. We have had the delayed completion of Nambore, and my young brother, the sports state minister of sports, has been doing a lot of explaining with the engineer Magogo, and you know, then we've had also the OPM, this iron sheets business. Just not long ago, some technical officer handed himself over because we were used to hearing the political leaders, minister this, state minister that, but this time also a technical, one of the principal officer was paraded before the anti-corruption court, and I think by close of the day yesterday, he was remanded. So that has been the week really. It hasn't been a nice one, so to say, because all that I'm talking about basically regrets. We regret to announce.
There was some, okay, but then before we do that, I think Rachel will come on with her week.
I think Bwana Rugarama has put it well. It's a week of regrets, actually. Among them was the returning of the body of late Muhakanizi, who was a long-serving public servant, and in his last role, of course, as a permanent secretary. He was of a different ministry, but he's been in that role for many years. It would have been a fitting time to actually celebrate the kind of public servant that he represented. He had an old-fashioned approach to work, a very hardworking man who gave, according to those who knew him, who gave his all to the recovery and stability economically of this country. It's a shame that people of that caliber are not celebrated more, and that political figures have a way of occupying all the space that should really fit or should be occupied by people who are more of heroes than we usually hear. Yeah, sure. That aside, this week also, in my book of notable events, has been the situation of some of our prominent leaders, including the Inspector General of Police, the State Minister for Internal Affairs, the Speaker of Parliament, Deputy Speaker of Parliament, who have joined voices lately to condemn the excesses of the Uganda Police Force. The two are immediate supervisors of that entity, and they have expressed displeasure at the way the forces have been taking people who may have run foul of the law, but the way in which they have handled has raised eyebrows and caused much consternation, not just locally, but also internationally. So much so that the Speaker of Parliament herself had to go to the police station to see that her legislators are set free in the fracas that ensued ahead of their detention. But this particular issue has been front and center of Ugandan politics for many years. Unfortunately, like Ndugu Rugarama observed, it still is one of the regrets this week. Ndugu Mututa.
Does the speaker need to go to police to present her case?
Yes,
make a statement.
because
Yes.
the deputy,
Does that mean then the systems are no longer working?
yes, because the state minister for internal affairs said he had issued orders to have those people released unconditionally. They were still there.
So who is serving who?
That's not for me. I wouldn't know.
I like that. But away from that, there was also the other point I think Ndugu Rugarama was raising. And it was about what? And then I was thinking, you know, Uganda is a very interesting country. Sometimes you sit down and you're like, this is not happening, but things happen. Sometimes it's because I think people over-assume, or sometimes people do things they are supposed to do, like the president was saying, you do things you are not supposed to do, and you leave things that you are supposed to do. That also, but there are many things actually happening in this country. Sometimes you wonder whether it is like this time people are talking about the battering of women MPs mainly, that the women MPs are being mishandled, and there's a lot of debate that is going on. But far from that, I was also following this story of I think we're expecting someone from Nairobi. I hope we'll be able to listen to someone talking to us from Nairobi. And there is this two scenarios. There was a scenario, and I think we'll have that clip of people, and now talking about religion, of this man who is telling people, you tingisha simu yako utapata pesa, tingisha tena juu chini. And people are tingisharing their phones in anticipation of getting 300,000 by the end of the week.
So that
What does tingisha mean? I don't understand.
You shake.
Okay, shake.
I think that gospel, Comrade Muto, just a statement really I want to make on that. That kind of gospel.
It is a cult, it's not a gospel.
Must be. You see, the problem is that it is not just there. It is all over.
Yeah, it is just a...
Especially on the African continent, and that is taking advantage of our people instead of clearly analyzing their problems and advising ways of overcoming their challenges. They are being taken advantage of by cunning people, and our governments seem not to care, and that is dangerous.
I think caring could be an understatement. But at the same time, there is this blanket of the freedom of worship. Now, when we stick and I think Ndugu Rugarama, you'll guide us on that. If there is the freedom has been given. Now, and these are some of the things that I think countries need to look at, because in the same country, Kenya, we are talking today, you know, the cult of Mackenzie, a man yes. who I hear over 100 people have already died by being told that you have to fast, and after fasting, and if God allows your fast, you definitely will go to him.
This is an equivalent of what
Chiwetere did
here.
So this kind of idiocy, but at the same time, I was looking at the case, it's a very interesting case that the lawyers are presenting. They are saying, can someone prove that these people are not in heaven?
But can you also prove they are?
But
So for me, I was asking for pictures when they're posing with God.
Of course, the maxim is that who
proves
arranges
exactly
they
must
prove.
Yes.
But you see, really, let's be serious for once. In this particular regard, I think my land colleague is taking a joke a little bit too far.
Sure, sure.
We are at one time there is somebody also, some lawyer from Kenya again, who took God to court.
I think it's the same lawyer. I doubt, but it could be the same lawyer.
They would have mentioned that anyway. It could, but you see, we are talking about lives of human beings.
Yeah, these are not just numbers.
And we are looking at, because the moment we begin discussing death and we are paying attention to mere statistics, we are not looking at those that have lost their lives and the lives to whom they are responsible. These are heads of families. They have left children, they have left women, women have left their husbands, loved ones. The economy has lost, the country has lost the contributors to the growth of the economy. You know, all of that. We are touching the moral fiber of a nation. I think let's put legalese aside and say no. Religion must be regulated. I'm glad that we are going to be talking again
about it.
And I think this is the tail end of how far that government or leadership, for that matter, must look into some of these affairs. You cannot leave things to forces of demand and supply.
You are bringing up an issue, I think, which needs legal interpretation. And I have been talking about this in most cases in passing. When we talk about human rights, when we talk about individual freedoms, you know, there is the freedom of an individual, me. We are three here. I have my freedom. But this freedom also has to be subjected to the other people's freedoms.
Absolutely.
Now, if we are going to say these freedoms are absolute to the beholder, then we are going to have an issue with the freedom and the harmony of that society where the individual exists. So for me, I believe to be able to create a sane community, the freedoms of an individual to a greater extent must be limited, subjected to the common freedom, the common good of the freedom of that society.
I entirely
That's
agree.
what I believe.
It's, for instance, my right. Let me just give this scenario, if I may say, not to bathe. If I don't want to bathe, I will not bathe. I can go without bathing for a month. But if I must come to the other members, to groups of people, and I want to interact with them, and I have not bathed for that long, and I'm stinking, that community or those other people I will be going to have got a right to stop me from offering them offensive smell, and therefore they have to bathe me.
Yeah, apparently.
Because I'm actually infringing
on their
their right to a clean environment.
I think one of the more important reasons for these states of affairs, and as you said, it's not limited to Kenya, it's not limited, not even to Africa. There are cases where such excesses
we
have
have
noted.
had these idiots also.
As far as South Korea,
yes, suicide, yes.
there was a man who, in Guyana many years ago, who committed the same kinds of crimes. But I think what makes it so hard is by the time someone within the establishment thinks it wise to talk to the authorities, it's usually too far gone. It's a process. It takes brainwashing over a prolonged period of time.
Sure.
Typically, at least a decade. These are people who grew up in these circles, have children there. They don't really have exposure. In most cases, cultic groupings do not allow their people to mingle freely with others. They pose mental, psychological, even physical barriers, so that your experience is limited to only you, and you really believe that is the only way things are done. There are some who go to the extent of banning their members from even engaging in education at all. Others say not even immunization.
Yeah.
But I think I'm saying that the danger is usually that by the time you hear of these things, because they're very closed, these societies are typically self-serving in every way. In many cases, they have their own gardens, they have their own living spaces. They don't interact that much with others. So others also tend to see them a certain way.
Weird, yes.
And weird, and they typically don't engage them meaningfully. To know that, for example, there are many who are starving, even while these others are tilling gardens. There are people who are wasting away. So, as you were saying, one of the ways, and it's not an easy thing, for the state to take a deliberate effort to identify every weird character. It is, I'm told, in certain parts of this country, there is a grouping that actually climbs trees as they worship. The women sit on the trees and the men, I'm told.
I like that.
The priest also sits on trees. But
like birds.
Yes.
One time they come down.
And I'm told
we had one in my area who told people was flying, but this time didn't fly, he landed.
So the long and the short is that the brainwashing, and I think the specialist or their obsession with cutting their members off from the rest of society is a fertile breeding ground for these sorts of practices. So much so that I think these people are brainwashed to the extent of psychological damage.
Yeah, but
because wasting away is an extreme form. Not even drinking poison, wasting away. And there was one character who was, the police wanted to engage her, at least to feed her something. And I'm told she tightly closed her lips.
You leave the guy there.
Well, I think they took her to a medical facility or something. But what
but
we are
no,
saying
that's
is,
mental, yes.
Yes, what we are saying is that these processes are so gradual, they are so deliberate, and they are so manipulative that a person loses sense of what is reality. And they begin to actually function as if this is the way of doing things. So for them, they will actually give their life in exchange for this kind of existence, which is a very sad way of being.
I understand, but of course we're dealing much on that, but it's also something which is real, and we have seen this happen. But also, I think according to Nduguru Garama, the state should take interest in all these things, because like this particular one in Kenya, I think
in a forest.
Yes, government failed to follow up on what was happening. And but you can also understand in the past 1, 2, 3 years, Kenya has been in chaos. That there's been a lot of bickering within the government, and maybe the systems have not been very well aligned to handle certain issues. So the internal mechanisms of the system could have had issues. But that
even
was
information is scanty concerning these kinds of people.
They are also very, 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 like you said, a very close society. But I think that also is an eye-opener to many other governments, not only Kenya, not even in the region, that there must be interest to know what these religions are doing. And like we were saying, some of these freedoms have to be also monitored. If you allow people to do whatever they do because they have that freedom, there is a likelihood that some of these freedoms can be abused. And because now we are now counting dead bodies, people who have lost their lives, families
almost
that have
100.
lost, yeah, they have lost. Actually, we may even not know, because people may not know exactly how many, like we had with the Chiwetere case. You cannot establish, there's no list, so it is hard to know how many people, but like you said, about 100 people are counted to have died in that. And we will, I think here from our colleague who will be talking to us from Nairobi, will give us more of that information. I don't know if we have him already online, but I think he's not yet online, but we'll get him along the way. So Nduguru Garama.
Yes.
Jumping back to the Sudan. And by the way, even before we go to Sudan, something is not happening very well in Kenya. I think they are going back to the demonstrations next week. And these demonstrations, after demonstrations, are not going to be very healthy, not only for Kenya, but for the region. Because remember last time when we had issues here, and because it's a gateway, Kenya is a gateway to Uganda, we get a lot of our supplies from there. So when they are in this type of business, we equally get affected. But anyway, the long and short, we look at Sudan. What is your take on what is happening in this beautiful country?
Let me just say something about Kenya. If our brother, Comrade Simba Orlando, comes through, probably he's going to expound on what I would have said. Whenever we, and when I say we, I mean those who in the Pan-African ranks, talk about the influence in the past, which was referred to as the invisible hand, which is no longer invisible, of the white man in our domestic affairs, mainly developing economies and particularly Africa, then we are branded as people who would want to heap our problems, which we have created ourselves, as being visited upon us by foreigners. The truth of the matter is that the current events in Kenya, and as of a month ago, for instance, I do not want to go into the history of Kenya, we all know it, lest I turn that into our today's topic. But usually, what happens with the colonial, the imperialist, is that he will identify if there are already cracks, and he makes sure that he provides an engagement and holds the two seemingly antagonistic camps in a manner that at any one given time, if the imperialist demands are not met by the camp which is in leadership, then he will use the other camp against the camp in leadership. Now, what I'm saying is that when you look at the situation in Kenya and you use very heavy lenses, you will realize that actually what is happening is that the economy of Kenya was almost grounded not long ago, where the dollar was nowhere to be seen in the reserves. The Central Bank of Kenya didn't have the foreign exchange. And therefore that meant that it was very difficult for them to purchase or to trade on the international market. They would move around in the spirit of the East African community, and you had a statement by one of the leaders
that they were begging.
They are here begging for dollars. The wisdom that God bestowed upon Dr. William Ruto told him to devise ways of getting partners that could help him. And they struck a deal with some of the countries that matter. For instance, the fuel or the supplies within to do with transport, diesel, petrol, and other, they are now buying it in Kenyan shillings. That was a deal they struck. And that didn't go well with some powers. I saw a presentation of the United States ambassador before a group of those who is who in Kenya, and what she was saying, I realized that when you see, there's one writer who says that when you see your enemy giving all praises to you, all of a sudden, you know that you have lost your mission to the people, and anytime you will be taken over. I do reckon the fact that these imperialists, in majority of the cases, when they see an economy, because Kenya is our biggest economy in the East African bloc, and it is not in the best interest to maintain a country so stable like we used to have in Tanzania, the Chama cha Mapinduzi, one political party for a very long time since in the regaining independence, and it is moving her people to greater heights. It is one leader after the other. You do not have that claim that there is dictatorship or also so according to your yardstick. That kind of progress must be broken. So in the case of Kenya, I will tell you, I'm not claiming to be a Jewish prophet. I will tell you that even the threatened reoccurrence of street protests, there is that hand that is not yet satisfied with a deal that was struck, for instance, to join the bandwagon that is discarding and doing away with the importance of the dollar. I will stop it at that. Now, going to Sudan.
But she had something to add before
on
you.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good thing that he has brought that to the fore. I've been of the opinion that Mr. Odinga is no longer serving the interests of the people of Kenya. That is my personal opinion.
Yeah, but there are people following him. Then why would he not be serving the interests?
Everybody has loyalists. It doesn't mean they're doing the right thing.
Apartheid had
Everybody has.
supporters.
And they still do.
Did it mean that they were doing the correct thing?
What we are saying is that, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Raila ended his meaningful usefulness to the future of Kenya about 10 years ago. This is a gentleman who entered deals starting in the days of Mr. Moi. And at various stages, efforts were engaged to try and get him on board, to actually placate him, to actually put him in line for a meaningful shot at the presidency. But this is a man who disembarks at will. Whether you give him the prime ministership, whether you make him deputy president, he will embark mid-journey, only to come with new demands. I'm of the opinion, again, that along the way, this placating him, which has not served Kenya any better, has made him something of a challenge on the journey to true democracy.
Maybe that's
So much so that.
Maybe it's that part of the democracy.
Well, once upon a time, he was on the right course. But my personal opinion is that he lost his way many years ago when he now put personal interests, including ego, at the helm of his negotiating power. It became an issue of threats and more threats. If you don't do this, I'll be in the streets. If you don't do this, I'll cause the people of Nyanza province to get on my side, and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to say is that in the beginning, and he still does have some valid reasons, but you know, life is in cycles. There is a time when you have real bargaining power. But as the days go by and you reach these deals whose impact you never allow to see the light of day, you say, okay, we've entered this deal, and in so many days from now, I'm hoping that this is where we'll have gone concerning this democratic milestone and the other democratic milestone. But the man never allows these things to reach maturity. Before this thing even sees the light of day, he begins to say, it will never work, and therefore I am back, give me more. That kind of person, in my opinion, Dr. Ruto is not prepared to engage with a person who does not really want a difference.
You know, he was talking about when your enemy starts praising you. There's also the other saying that when your enemy joins your dance, then you have not to dance for long.
Okay.
Because maybe
now,
he has learned.
The question would be, the enemies of Kenya, who do they seem to be okay with? That should answer your question. Do they seem to be comfortable with Dr. Ruto? Apparently not. So if they are more comfortable with the other guy, you know that this guy is no longer serving the interests of Kenya. It is that simple.
No.
I'm sorry?
No, it's okay. So,
the imperialists are always clear concerning their interests. If destabilizing Kenya is what will get them to where they want to go, they will join you, whether they were enemies yesterday. And that is why we have the crisis in present day in Sudan at this time. These guys, Burhan or Dagola, whatever their names are, have been in the mix for the last 20 years. So why would they become a problem today? Except that the same characters, their hold on Sudan is loosening. And before that comes to fruition, they will at least kill Sudan. So we are saying to know who is for who in what country per time, you just see where those people are.
Yeah, like you are saying now that we are moving to Sudan, and rightly put so, that sometimes it's the history that we wake up in the morning. There's also the other saying that when you go to bed with an itching behind you, you wake up with the smelly fingers. Because what you do, again, follows you up. Some of the problems that we have, including in Kenya, are the deals that the leaders, and we'll discuss this thing some time back here, the leaders cut deals behind the curtains. Say, if you do this, we shall do this. If you do me here, I will also do you here. Now, sometimes when the light comes, and then still you have to keep those agreements, there becomes a problem. And I think that's what we're now also seeing that happens in the Sudan. You had started with the Sudan. We'll continue from there.
The Sudanese question is one of the loosening grip of America in particular in Africa. They are very conscious that they've been overtaken on many fronts by China and other suitors. In the case of Sudan, the Middle East, the UAE and so on, they've increased in financial clout. They've positioned themselves very, very strategically so that they can have a meaningful contribution to this discourse. In this particular case, this man, Dagola, reached the point of even supplying troops to Yemen on the side of Saudi.
Was the deputy commandant of the army?
Yes,
then,
but of course, in a regular arrangement, that would be irregular.
Yeah.
Why would a paramilitary be supporting troops when there's a regular army?
Even Libya, even Chad.
So what we're trying to say is that these these colonialists are very conscious of the fact that they've been overtaken by Russia and China in terms of political influence on the African continent. America, in particular, made the mistake of outsourcing its African policy. And they actually relegated some of that to the people, these Middle Eastern neighbors of ours, the UAE and so on and so forth, to fill the gap that was intensified by Mr. Trump when he categorized the peoples of Africa in very unpalatable language. But America is now belatedly trying to play catch-up. Remember 15 years ago, America was still the dominant power in this part of the world. And at that time, you remember, single-handedly, America manufactured the breakaway of South Sudan. I'm not saying they don't deserve a nation of their own, but it was definitely cooked, fried, and served in Washington, the breakaway of South Sudan. But today, years later, America does not have a meaningful direction when it comes to the happenings of Sudan, because their grip on power there has all but disappeared. We know that this became more pronounced upon the exit of Bashir. In 2019, we remember that America did not have a forceful position on the exit of Bashir. And it's because they had neglected Africa, thinking Africa would be ready for the taking whenever and however suited them. They have now woken up many years later to find out that their gaps have been meaningfully filled by the Chinese, by many other people.
Yeah, but I think before
So, even before you come in, it is a struggle to establish the old order. This Burhan man and the other man, Dagola, they are the same ones responsible for the chaos in Darfur. The murder, the pillaging, the bombing of the African peoples.
Actually, I was bombed there in Darfur.
Okay. It was, General Burhan was at the helm of that operation, together with this man, Dagola. And under the orders of Bashir, they were to decimate the African peoples of Darfur so that the Islamic imprint, not Islamic, because the Darfur people are also Islam, the black people, but the Arabic footprint would come back to life. At that time, America and the West did not make that much noise because, you know, they still control the spy. But now that this man, Burhan and Dagola, are firmly in bed with Russia in particular, General Bashir signed an agreement with Russia back in 2017 when he was still in power. Remember, he was ousted in 2019. At that time, he invited Russia to enter an arrangement concerning the gold mining. By the way, Sudan is the third largest exporter of gold on this continent, or at least extractor. They signed an agreement for him to for Russia to enter the gold mines of Sudan. They also entered an agreement for Russia to build a naval base for Sudan. At that time, the Wagner Group, which is an extension of the Russian government.
It's another paramilitary, exactly.
But it's an extension of the Russian state.
Yeah.
We know that they're active in the diamond mines of CAR, Central African Republic. We know they're active for uranium purposes in Mali. We know that they are also active in Sudan for gold.
Yes.
For them, they are active in Libya for oil.
Yes.
So for them, they are wherever resources allow. But the long and the short is that these two men have shown an inclination to leave the West firmly behind and to align themselves fully with Russia, China, and other competitors. So at this opportune moment, these jackals are waiting to pounce firmly back into the Sudan equation. That is the problem.
Yeah, but also I think and on most of these times on this set I have told people, for me, I have no problem, and I don't even blame the West for doing what they are doing. Because at the end of it, when you look at what is happening in Sudan, it is not the West which is suffering. In fact, they are airlifting their people back to their countries. But the arms they have supplied, and there are more coming, because I saw a delivery of arms yesterday being delivered
from which side?
From the Russian group to the Sudanese army. But you realize that these arms are going to kill us, the Africans, and we are paying heavily for that. In terms of our economy, some of them are in shambles because we have to equip and retool our armies. But maybe we also need to look at how did this thing start? How did the Janjaweed came now to be the same official military of the Sudanese government, and why was it left to be so? Because we have two parallel systems, parallel military groups in Sudan, and part of the problem was now bringing them together under one administration to be under the army of Sudan. To me, which was really something that I thought was sensible, but that could not even be allowed to happen for the basic reasons, you know. So Ndugu Rugarama, I think we need to look at how did this come to be? How did we end up with two forces in a country like Sudan?
When Chinua Achebe writes about the problem of Africa, and he says that the problem of, actually he was writing about the problem of Nigeria. He says the problem of Nigeria is nothing but the absence of leadership.
Sure.
The same could be said of the entire African continent in majority of the cases. Because even where we have got sober-minded people, like when you look back in history, where we had the presence of sober minds, then when we were coming into the regaining of independence in Ghana, and I've said this several times, but because every other time it is relevant, I'm not shy to repeat it. The imperialist will make sure that that kind of proper progress on the African continent, or for that matter, on any part, in any part of the world where the imperialist feels that the presence of clean, clear-headed leadership is not going to serve his interest, will automatically be eliminated. If not, they are going to sustain a battle that is going to make you running the government and serving your people almost an impossibility. It is world over. The circumstances in Cuba are there for us to see that the economic embargo, for instance, on Cuba is not because there is any problem with the Cuban leadership, but simply because Cuba does not cede her sovereignty to anybody, but wants and has worked tirelessly to serve her people. In Venezuela, the same story. When you come to the African continent and you look at Sudan, first of all, the most, in my opinion, and people will bear me witness, those who have cared really to read about the history of Africa, when you look at the writings of senior comrade Cheikh Anta Diop about the history of Africa, and you look at how he contextualizes Sudan. Sudan, first of all, by name Sudan. Sudan means burnt black, you know, something that is very black. Now, you cannot be in an area like Sudan and you are not that, because that is archaeologically evidenced that the people of Sudan are the dark colored, skin-colored human beings. So whoever is there and is not that, if we are not going to blame it on the migrations, then we are going to say you are there either by forceful occupation. But historically, the over 7,000, if my memory serves me right, of the activities in Sudan, we have had contestations. The contestations have ranged from religious differences. Those who say they are, even by the way, the argument that the Muslims, even within the Muslims, there have been arguments and contestations about the Sunni and the other group, which is not, and they don't see it eye to eye. For instance, we know that because of those differences, or within the Islam as a religion, we have had the people of Iran and the people of Iraq not seeing eye to eye, because although all of them are Muslims, but they are not of the same alignment.
Sure.
Now, the same story was being reproduced in Sudan for a number of years. Further, in Sudan itself, there has been Christianity. Christianity, it's not, when you look at Islam in Sudan, you think that everybody in Sudan is actually Muslim. But I must remind our audience that people like the late Dr. what's the name? It wants to escape my mind. The vice president, then the one who died, Garang, John Garang, may his soul rest in eternal peace. It was his theory was, and he fervently supported it, and he preached it, that you don't have to divide Sudan. Let Sudan remain the way it is. I can assure you, we shall tell our people that we are better off having one Sudan, and if it is on the account of one man, one vote, I will take the leadership. I agree with him. It was never to be, like Sister Takari has put it correctly here, that there were some other forces, even beyond America, but America being at the forefront, who wanted to see to it that actually that country is divided into two. Now the argument would be, those of us who do not want to be bothered by thinking a lot and digging deep, that can't you see the level of suffering of those who were in the southern part of Sudan? Was it therefore not right? I was at the forefront, for instance, when it came to the issues of the two Sudan. And at the time when they finally held the referendum, I participated directly under the auspices of the Pan-African movement. But I will tell you that people who wanted the two Sudans in existence were over and above the ordinary Sudanese. And we know the reasons why. That is why, when they could not be so sure, around that time, because of the huge size of Sudan and the thin presence of leadership, al-Bashir, General al-Bashir, created the Janjaweed. These Janjaweed people of yours were actually creation of government. They are the ones who would be sent from time to time to go and terrorize whoever, because you must also remember that a number of oil wells, the rich ones, are actually that side towards the southern part. Now, if you are looking at South Sudan and the bordering with the Sudan, then, and those wells, by the way, up to now, are fiercely contested, and they are being exploited by not South Sudan, but by the Khartoum regime. So the creation, therefore, of the two Sudans was as a consequence of, yes, agreed, the interests of those who were suffering and who thought that, for instance, they would make a life better by having a separate country, but most importantly, but by those who thought that by dividing the Sudan, like they want to divide Nigeria, they have wanted to divide other parts of the country.
Yes.
They made it a point that up to now, by the way, and I think maybe, I don't know if we're going for a break.
Yeah, when we come back, we are going to look at then the consequences of this divisionism, because we have seen Sudan divided from day one in terms of race, in terms of religion, in terms of ethnicity, in terms, because we were also looking at the history of Sudan. It started from the kingdoms, the Kush, so all of this, and this particular area was for the blacks and Christians. How did it now come to be to get to where we are? So don't go away. We'll be back shortly after this break, and we thank you for being with us on UBC.
Topic of the day on UBC.
If I'm looking at issues of taxation and all that, I will definitely run for the Kateshumbas. Okay? Okay. If I look at, if I'm looking at issues of investments and what, I would definitely run. I would definitely run for Dr. Emure Kugonza and Honorable Omara. Okay. If I'm looking at issues of the law, I will run for our very, very own people. I have the bosses, I have the Katuntus, I have the Robin Abakojos. So everyone is talented in one way or another.
Did you mention Katuntu?
Okay. Yes.
Is he yours?
Yes, he is.
Yours as an NRM?
He is.
Was brought to you by
Get away with MTN Momo Advance. Momo Advance tops up your Momo to complete your transactions. Dial star 165 star 5 star 3 hash to apply. MTN Momo Advance is always available when you need it.
The stage is a world of entertainment. Get the latest entertainment, lifestyle, events and activities. Chats with celebrities that make headlines.
It's your girl Zari, Mama Tifa. I'm in town, I'm in Uganda.
It's showbiz. Join me, Mary. I intend to connect you to a lot of fun. Cause I know you want it, you love it, you enjoy it. All on Powerful Level Magazine, reloaded for you right here on UBC. Don't miss out every Saturday, 12 p.m.
It's the encounters with our majestic gorillas. The thrill of taking on the falls of the Nile River. The joy of discovering new traditions and a lot more. Join us at the 2023 Pearl of Africa Tourism Expo from the 26th to the 29th of April at the Commonwealth Resort, Munyonyo. Rediscover our country's uniqueness and see what the tourism sector has in store for you. Visit www.poate.co.ug to secure your spot and get set to learn, network and explore. The Pearl of Africa Tourism Expo is brought to you by the Uganda Tourism Board in partnership with Competitiveness and Enterprise Development Projects. Explore Uganda, the Pearl of Africa.
Labor Day, or International Workers' Day, is an annual holiday that takes place on 1st May to celebrate the achievements of workers. Uganda will join the rest of the world to celebrate under the theme Promoting Positive Work Culture and Ethics, a prerequisite for increased investment, employment opportunities, and household incomes. Regardless of how you choose to celebrate, make sure you give yourself a pat on the back for all your success. Join us for the live celebrations on Monday, 1st May 2023 at Namutumba District Headquarters.
Yeah, welcome back from that break, and by the time we left the screen, we were talking about the two Sudans, and I think a lot of parallels have existed in this country we now call Sudan. Of course, we have the South Sudan and the Sudan. We were talking about the two militaries, the paramilitary Janjaweed, which was a creation actually of President Bashir. Now, when President Bashir came to power after overthrowing an elected government of the Prime Minister Sadiq, I think he had all fears, knowing that at some point what he had done will also come to challenge him. And of course, I think he was right on that. So the creation of these two forces was partly as a safety gap to ensure that the two people, Dakola and Fata, may not sit down to agree on anything. And he was pushing separately all of them for their allegiance, that each of them will be aligned to him more than the other. And that's why he had to allow Dakola to lead. And you know, this particular general comes from the Darfur region. And he was given that force to make sure that the rebellion which was developing in Darfur was crushed. And like she put it, they have done a lot of terrible things.
Heinous crimes.
In fact, to the extent that if President Bashir was to be taken to the ICC, these two gentlemen are also part of that group to be taken to the ICC.
I hope you remember that Sudan, after the overthrow of Bashir, was struck off the list of global terrorists.
Yes.
Now the question is, why? All of a sudden, the former Saul had turned into a Paul.
Into Paul, so overnight.
The argument, if you will permit me, Ndugu Mututa, because I was telling you that the problem we have in Sudan, although we must look at the history of Sudan itself, which is also critical, because what I started off by telling you, that Pan-Africanists, we have always suffered from the neoliberal scholars who accuse us of heaping every problem to the invisible hand, the former invisible hand of the white man, when in actual sense, we are the ones, so they say, who manufacture these problems. I do not want to appear as if I'm doing the devil's advocate by saying that the African leaders do not have their fair share of the blame when it comes to the problems that their own people suffer. They do, we know for a fact. But when you dig deep, the seemingly problems created by African leaders, in majority of the cases, are actually indirectly or directly brought onto them by the imperialists. The question of Sudan, the differences that have been exploited over time in religion, the Christians, because in Sudan itself, we have had the over 700 years. It is a historical fact that there have been Christians. Now, when you look at the vast, that expanse, that huge country as it has been, and until, of course, recently when it was cut off, and we created South Sudan, there has been absence of leadership. So much that, for instance, when you visit the Nuba Mountains, who is leading who in the Nuba Mountains? There is a class of Sudanese, yes, who are Muslims, but they are not necessarily the radical Muslims, if you will permit me use the word radical. At one time, during the intense fightings between the South, the SPLM forces of Dr. John Garang and Khartoum Bashir, the administration in Khartoum was convincing Dr. Garang and his comrades that you are a nice man, speaking about Garang now, why don't you become a Muslim? You see, you Israel become a Muslim, and all this trouble will be done away with. So that now shows you that we have had this interesting stuff within the Sudan itself, the contestations in as far as religious affiliations are concerned, the contestations within the color, that I am more brown and therefore I'm Arab, I'm not necessarily. There are people, by the way, in Sudan who are dark, but they do not consider themselves Africans. If you didn't know that.
Actually, let alone that, there are also Arabs who are dark, and they are not also considered Arabic.
That is even in Libya. If you remember that, there is the southern part of Chad, the Libya. We have got Libyan. It's just Gaddafi who didn't believe in that nonsense. So yes, true. Anyhow, away from the differences that have been obtaining in Sudan, that have created all sorts of and manner of wars, the events leading to the outbreak of what we are now witnessing in Sudan, Khartoum and the surrounding suburbs, was created mainly because of the geostrategic interests, and my sister here alluded to them, of the foreign powers. The giant that America has been for a very long time, the number of bases that America has created overseas, not just on African continent, because I think the last one was created during the administration of Barack Obama, when he went to Ghana for the very first time. And I think Dr. Osejefo Kwame Nkrumah's spirit must be crying in the grave. They created a base there. There is the American base, which was created during the time of Barack Obama. Now, in Sudan, Russia was interested in creating a military base. And she engaged her counterpart, the leadership in Khartoum. The administration, the ambassador actually, the American ambassador in Khartoum, as usual, they got to know about it. And there was a call that don't entertain that kind of request. Unfortunately, the communication was rejected, and they continued with the arrangement to have the base, the Russian base. Remember that geostrategically speaking, when you look at Sudan, and you look at, because now I can tell you that, for instance, Egypt is practically involved, the Egyptian forces are practically involved in the street and house-to-house fights in Khartoum. They are there. But anyway, my point here is, because I want to give you that picture, how all this came out.
Yeah, because
when there was a rejection that no, I will go along, America, remembering that China, just a few, not so long a distance in Djibouti, had established a military, one of the biggest military bases, by the way. The China has one of the biggest military bases on the African continent, in Djibouti, there. Now, looking at, strategically speaking, therefore, Russia establishing a military base in Sudan to counter, because in a manner of speaking, really, Egypt has had, after it had been defeated during was it a 5 or 7 days war, when Israel beat all those Arab countries, and Egypt was created, was turned into a satellite state of America. Her budget, defense budget, is largely financed by America. Creating a Russian base in Sudan and linking up with a strong ally down in Djibouti, remembering that in the Middle East, there is Iran, which is an ally, certainly, of Russia, we know for a fact, and it is developing nuclear weapons. We don't know for sure at what stage it is, that even what the arrangement that Barack Obama had gone into when Trump came, they did away with all that, and it collapsed. It poses, in their opinion, an existential geopolitical challenge to their interests. And they must, therefore, if it means, like my sister put it, if it means having Sudan a failed state, worse than Somalia, worse than Libya, let it be, but they will want to do everything humanly possible to make sure that even the intervention of African Union is going to be curtailed or delayed or disorganized, such that their interests, selfish interests, are served.
Yeah, but I think we looking at the geopolitics in this, of course, all this is linked to the geopolitics in this particular area. Still, I'll look at African mediocrity, yeah, mediocrity, yeah, because really you are looking at Sudan. Eritrea neighboring it is a failed state, rather. You are looking at Ethiopia, they're just recovering from the beating.
Central African Republic?
Yes. You are looking at Central
Chad.
Africa, you are looking at Chad, you are looking at Libya, neighboring. So all these countries, South Sudan, these countries, you look at Sudan as an area where proliferation of arms can easily take place. I think people are moving in and out from these neighborings.
Majority of our countries on the African continent, with their porous borders, the proliferation of small arms are there, and that is why we have got in the main, we have got all these civil wars you see around.
Yeah, so that
even before you go very, very far along some of these roads, think for a minute about the focus of the international media. And we are talking about the media of these imperialists. Where is their main focus? I don't know if you've noticed. Their main story is evacuating their people. How dare that be the headline? When 15 million people are struggling to get water, medical care, food, they can't get around.
Yeah, actually, so this idiots
and
bombing,
the main story is UK took its people? Portugal took its people?
They are even blaming UK for delaying to take her people. Why did they delay?
Those are, that shows you that these are people who are looking for their own, whatever, however it comes.
Own, yes.
It is not important that Sudan is bleeding. As long as the highlight is America sent troops from Djibouti, their Djibouti base, evacuated a mere 100 people. Portugal had 5, Germany had 2.
100 something.
When nearly 500 people have died, the story is that, Britain had 50 people. That is the story.
That
shows
Takari,
you.
Why should it not be a story? When it's me who has touched your house, why should I not care that I have forgotten to remove my spoon
and 2 dogs?
Why should I not make that a big story?
Mm-hmm. What we're trying to say is that we cannot afford to look at Sudan as a case in isolation. These are people who are shameless in the day, they're shameless at noon, and they're shameless after hours. To make this the story, when nearly 500 people have lost their lives.
Exactly.
To make this a story when people can no longer access health care. In fact, UN agencies tell us at least 15 million people, because this is 15 million people, are in a dire state on account of this. But because they are so self-centered, because they actually don't care.
Yeah, because you remember,
for the welfare of
even
anybody
before,
else.
even the breakout of this war, there was an issue of starvation.
No, that is not the story. For example, if you look at Ukraine, because these are also white people, when last was there a story that focused on how many Americans were removed, and when they were removed, and how many Germans were removed? The story, because they want to demonize Russia. Russia has its own problems. But the focus has been on how many Ukrainians have been slaughtered by Russians. Now, how many Sudanese have been slaughtered by the machinations and the wicked schemes of the West? If you're talking about Sudan.
I told you they are still retooling and loading more arms.
Now, how many Sudanese, we will not even talk about South Sudan. How many people died from the 50s when there were these interminate struggles in South Sudan? But what we are trying to say, that should be instructive of how deceptive the Westerners can be on a good day. If they can show that the 6 cats belonging to a Ukrainian diplomat made it safely on a plane, really? When people are dying, being maimed, blown up?
I was in the Darfur, I think, as an intern. We had gone but we were in a convoy to deliver food to the people of Darfur. Because these are mainly the people who have been collected from that area, and those are women and children who have, and old men and other people who have been injured, who had come from Darfur, from the rebel infested then areas. But we spent 3 days before we could reach. The first day we were told it was not safe to go. The second day we were told that it was rain and that the bridges will not be there. And then the third day, as we were going, then the Antonovs came and bombed us. And I think we lost 2 people on that, a driver and someone, an assistant. But why? The delay was meant because there had been a cholera outbreak in the camp. And we came to learn that cholera outbreak was actually human-made, so that more people, other than the men who are dying on the front line fighting with the Khartoum government and the Janjaweeds, those who are in the camp are also supposed to die, so that by the time UN gets there and gives them the medicine and the food, the number of them must have died. And actually, by the time we got there, many people had died. And then while you are doing that, then the Janjaweed, now this particular people would come and raid. Yes, they would come and raid. And then they will kill those who have failed to die of bombing and cholera and starvation.
At least
the system was, yes, to make sure that at least people who were in the Darfur.
Whole villages.
Yes.
So much so that the Darfur confrontation you're talking about, it was termed by UN agencies as the first genocide of the 21st century. Because the people of Darfur are not white,
yes,
no one has dwelled on the fact that probably millions were killed.
Yeah.
They talk about the people of Israel. I'm not denying the fact that they suffered. But you cannot highlight the misery of the Jews and the misery of the people of these recent conflicts of Europe, not even the people of Ukraine, without also elevating the dignity of the people of Africa who have also lost their lives at the hands of these wicked schemes. But you were asking earlier on, you said, well, why are we where we are? Nduguru Garama said earlier, the colonialists will look for a crack in the wall. And they are patient. They are only a little more patient than the devil. The devil God is most patient. The second more patient person is the devil. The third are wicked people. These people, they will wait patiently. When power changed hands in Khartoum, and the people had come up in a popular uprising, and they said, all right, Mr. Bashir, please go somewhere else. These 2 men, the war criminals of 20 years ago in Darfur, emerged because they were in prime places. And they agreed, for their own selfish interests, to be at the helm of Sudanese national politics. At that time, even if it had been a civilian operation to dislodge Mr. Bashir, the military took the place of the honor of the civilian movement, and it became headed by General Burhan. And guess who was his vice? Dogola, the militarist, the war criminal.
P3 dropout.
That very one. He
He's
took
a general.
charge.
He's a general.
That was 2019. Then when the army overthrew Mr.
Bashir.
Yes. But in 2021, no, in 19, there was a pretense that the civilians would actually take power.
Yes.
2 years later, the military actually showed its face and said, no, we will not share, we will be at the helm until we say so. But these two men were again in agreement, given their background. But this time around, over the intervening space between 21 and now, Mr. Dogola has increased in power and in money. Part of his money comes from supplying troops to the Yemen fight on the side of Saudi.
Just information,
Yes.
my sister. That Dogola money you're talking about actually is almost a $5 billion rich warlord.
Yeah, because
And we're talking about illegal loot.
Of course.
Okay.
Ask yourself why his money is not being freezed. Is he keeping it in the underground?
But
Or it
that
is in
aside,
banks?
Burhan also, because the military in Sudan in particular has a tradition of enriching and empowering itself. And so Burhan has a similar legacy. He also has a power, he has arms, and a criminal past.
And
So
money.
those two share those things. Now, nobody wants to give way because power is sweet, they told us. Burhan woke up one day under his so-called civilian-led operation, and he says, Mr. Dogola, please come under my wing, which is the regular army. Remember, this paramilitary was a creation of Bashir 10 years ago,
Oh, yes.
in 2013.
Yeah.
He created it to create a parallel power center because of his past. He thought that if there is a powerful enough paramilitary that is almost at the same level as the national
or
army,
better, actually.
then someone would think twice about overthrowing him. He created the problem that they are facing right now. But it is now a contestation of resources and the unwillingness to let go. This Dogola man, the paramilitary man, is into the gold mining operations.
Yeah, he's the one now working with the Russians in mining.
So that money, if he's 5 billion worth at this time, he wants to accumulate some more. Burhan must be at least as wealthy.
He did something more. Just slightly before the outbreak of this so-called civil uprising, he had imported well over 200 most powerful desert-fitted vehicles for what?
For what?
So, but
And
even
in what capacity?
And as you said, this contestation has been brewing for the last, for about 2 years.
Yes, because you remember when President Bashir was now looking at his troubles and sensing that his troubles could come from the army, he starts this paramilitary group.
100,000 strong.
Yes, but it was also meant as his personal army to deal with those who were trying to disorganize him politically. In fact, they killed many of the people who were opposed to his regime, and many lost their lives in that. But at the same time, as part of the problem, when he thought, because Fatah was becoming very popular and very strong, so he thought was going to work with now this Dogola man to neutralize the boss. And he, in his dreams, never thought that these people would ever work together, because he had pushed them more or less.
Not only that, the reason why he calculated they would not work out, he talked about a P3 dropout. The elite in Khartoum despise Dogola.
Yeah, because
and he's
most of the
because also
elite,
he's a village boy.
Yes, and most of the elite of Sudan who have been in power comes from the east of the country.
And this is a village boy.
Yes, who comes from the west.
With limited education.
Yes.
So they despise him. And so Dogola has come to the realization that these people will never accommodate him meaningfully.
Yeah.
So now it is his time to race for the prize without them.
But at the same time, you also realize that he, I think, was a very sharp P3, but a very sharp village boy, because he knew that if he worked with the Fatah, they will strike.
Burhan.
Yes, they will have a deal, and they did. But now, what comes in after they get rid of Bashir? Now the power struggle starts. Who is going to be who? Of course, he took his humble position to be under his boss, but you also realize that when they created the transition, it was supposed to last for 3 years. And the civilians were supposed to be there for 18 months, and the military was supposed to be there for 21 months, and after that, they had agreed to an election. During the transition, this man Dagola realizes that this Burhan man is now working with people they overthrew, Bashir's group. Some of them were actually brought and accommodated in the government. So he felt himself insecure, knowing that the people he had betrayed, because in all this, Bashir trusted him more than he trusted the boss. But he betrayed Bashir. Now, knowing that people of Bashir are coming back in government, that was part of his insecurity, and he has to get now his position clear. But at the same time, you remember, when the 21 months of the military was ending in 2021, I think in December, it was ending in January. No, it was ending in December. In November, they caused the coup and overthrew the other government, which was in the transition government, because they knew after that they were going to have elections, and if they go for elections, they were not sure that they were going to. So we are talking about this all.
The truth of the matter is, if you want to appreciate that actually this is not the Sudan war, you must look, you just look at who is in charge of different departments of rapid response forces, or that Dagora man of yours, who is in charge of different departments that constitute his force. You will find there a Chinese, you will find there a French, the specialists, you will find there a Russian, you will find. So at the end of the day, we are talking about, and how did this flare up at the end of the day? You will find that therefore we are talking about interested superpowers in the affairs of Sudan, and the media, because I don't want to lose this point of the media, which our sister Takari brought up. The media has for a very long time, and will, because I remember, for instance, the interview which was carried out by Christian Amanpower with the Libyan leader, and 3 days thereafter, because the question was posed, that supposing one time you wake up and you are around people whom you have suffered for such a long time are actually not with you. And senior comrade, may his soul rest in eternal peace, could not fathom that. He was like, that cannot happen. What happened? Because the media, the CNN of yours, the BBC of this world, whom we are saying that they only pride in looking at actually the journalistic gymnastics of theirs. They are extensions of spying network and of their mother countries, and they are part of the hegemonic powers that influence negative activities in Africa and the rest of the world. But most important of it, because I see us, of course, we are getting heavily consumed in this issue of Sudan, because it directly affects us. I'm looking at this, for instance, the amount of revenue we're going to lose as a country, Uganda and East Africa block. When this war continues, we shall stop exporting our most precious prized tea in Khartoum, which was fetching lots and lots of money. We are talking about, interestingly, there are very good universities in Khartoum, where our students and the students of the East African community, including even outside the East African bloc, were going to study. All that now has been put to a halt. So I'm therefore looking at the application of Sudan joining the East African community and how it has been put in the limbo. I'm looking at the spillover effects, for instance, of the refugees, the number of refugees. We would be talking about a curtain between Uganda and Sudan in South Sudan. But the nature, the state in South Sudan itself is extremely fragile. That in a manner of speaking, it is the East African community which is actually supporting the regime in South Sudan, or in Juba. Now, if that is the case, therefore, what happens in Sudan will certainly spill over to all these neighbors who are surrounding Sudan, and that includes Uganda.
People returning had to use Ethiopia.
That you see, even Ethiopia itself, by the way, because we didn't have time to go into Ethiopia. Ethiopia itself, thanks to the leadership, has been because the imperialists checked the influence and the growing power of Ethiopia by creating trouble in the Tigray region.
And
that trouble was created. You don't think absolutely, and Eritrea must be kept in that manner, and like in a majority of these other countries. But the shining example that was being provided by Ethiopia had to be curtailed simply because Ethiopia, arguably the fourth largest economy on the African continent, they were going into their niche in power production, because you know when you get the issues of power right, then it means that your industry sector is going to be at another level.
Production moves.
The Ethiopia is a shining example in the sense that they are the ones who are headquartering our African Union. And therefore, when you destabilize Ethiopia, you would have destabilized the heart of Africa. And they managed to do that. We are only trying to get out of that state. So if they can manage now to get Sudan in where they want it to be, then we are going to have now to be kind of firefighting. We are trying to put, and who is winning, by the way? Because I can assure you,
the past 5 years,
African Union, we are going to be told to back off. The interested parties are already known. The protagonists are in the superpowers, their interests, as long as they are not settled, I can assure you, Sudan is not going to settle. But we are not going to fold our arms and say we have given up. I am very sure their efforts, I have been getting communication from the African Union, their efforts being engineered by the president of Uganda and other leaders to make sure that through the regional blocs up to the African Union, we have a position on Sudan. Now, as to how we are going to be successful, because when we delayed in Libya, we have seen what came out of Libya up to now. So when we delay on the issue of Sudan, the truth of the matter is we are going to have another failed state. And Sudan is not going to fail alone. It is going to fail along with us.
Central African Republic is in trouble.
In shambles.
Absolutely.
DRC is in trouble. And these are the largest states on this continent.
Yeah. But I think when you come to think about it, it's true that people are coming here to disorganize Africa for their particular interests, which is unfortunate. But do we need an American base in Africa? Do we need a Russian base? Do we need a Chinese base in Africa?
But is it about you? It is about those people, their own needs. Is it about you?
So if someone wants to clean their behinds, why would we be the ones to watch?
But look at
Can't they do it elsewhere?
But look at Djibouti. Djibouti, and that is where actually it's been called.
Why I'm saying so, Rachel, is because I think Africa leadership, can we take Africa as our own? Can we hold the leadership of Africa responsible? Can we have responsible leaders in Africa who can say enough is enough? Because at the end of it, we are counting more than, of course, officially they are saying about 400, 500 people.
We shall go to churches and mosques and pray. After all, God is there, and it is the God of Africa who graciously was given to us by the white man. So all these troubles, we shall take them to church, we shall take them to the mosque, we shall pray, they will go away.
But
if
you are not-
need be, we shall fast
And die.
we shall go for overnight.
And then you die. Because
Whatever.
that's the
You're being
worst,
sarcastic.
the situation, that's where the situation has come. But what I'm saying is that I think there's high time now for the leadership of Africa to wake up. We need people on this continent who can say, yesterday I was reading Manila, the Philippines was telling America that we are going to give you, where you are going to have your people here, as long as you are not going to bring here machines that are going to be used in Taiwan.
Imagine such a ridiculous assertion. Do you think we know that they told, you give the devil half an inch, he'll take a mile. Imagine a man who, or this entity called the US, you've told them occupy this space. Will you be there to watch every second, every minute, what they bring and what they don't bring? Will they allow that? So
No.
by the time you said come, they will bring everything.
What happens,
I didn't even get
hypothetically,
that, by the way. Who gave the other? Manila gave
Philippines.
America. Philippines
Said,
gave.
please stay here. And why did they do that? They are worried about a growing China.
Exactly.
You know, Philippines, they're not far from China.
Yeah.
So they're worried about a growing China. So they say, big boy, please come and occupy this space to watch the other big boy.
But
while you're sitting here, don't bring your pans, don't bring your forks. Don't imagine that.
But at the same time, supposing on this
In the form of a
continent,
military base now.
Oh yeah. No, they had told them to go away.
Yes.
But now the threat of the other guy.
yeah, they're
is too
saying
much.
you can stay as long as certain conditions are supposed to be met. But you come to think about it. Supposing one time the African leadership said, no, you know what? I think we don't need these people. Because an African, I think we also have problems as Africans. And the problem is because our leaders are so susceptible and they fear to hold on the power. Now, because you know if you are not going to work with them, they are going to find a way of throwing you out of power, then you have to compromise so that you can survive. Then they will give you arms to be able to protect yourself. They will give you money to be able to do certain things. Imagine if Africans say, I think with your money, with your arms, we are not doing this. The problem is if you do like that, an idiot is going to say, I can. They will find someone anyway to work with, and they dislodge you.
We are not short of those.
That's
the biggest dilemma, by the way. What you are mentioning here is the biggest dilemma. That on the African continent, they are going to create the so-called democrats. For you, who comes up and say, no, we don't need a military base, we don't need this kind of aid, then they are going to make your government a dysfunctional government. They are also going to ensure that they project you as a dictator. The media, both local, because here you don't own any media, by the way.
Exactly.
You see, what kind of stories do you run? This side of the
You go to any media house and you'll be surprised.
So at the end of the day, we are looking at a situation whereby if you want to create yourself into another Kwame Nkrumah, another Abdul Gamar, another Thomas Sankara, then being reproduced in Robert, that was another one now, being reproduced into in the likes of the late Dr. Pombe Magufuli. They are going to create a situation where you are no more. And then they will put, but of course, you see, when you hear all that, as a practicing Pan-Africanist, as somebody who says, no, I can be eliminated, I can get out of the face of this world, but the movement
will remain. I
can assure you that the problem we are having, and I'm not saying that because the problems are there, therefore we put our hands on the head and then we cry. No. Before the 1976-79 economic miracle in China, the China was nothing to write home.
They were still eating rats. They were still eating rats. You can imagine.
Until Chairman Mao carried out what he carried out. By the way, there are so many people who lost their lives in China. For China to reach
it was forceful.
Exactly.
Yes. For China to reach where it is
if
now.
they were to stick
when
on
we
human...
hear stories For instance, in this Taiwan they were talking about, and we have had conversations here about Taiwan. And we hear what the interest of America in Taiwan, and by the way, they were pushing China to have a war, immediate war. This Nancy visits and what have you. They were pushing China to have a war, so that China can be distracted from that economic trajectory, the kind of trajectory they are at now. But China has got a way it moderates herself.
But I think we Africans, again, we have a problem. Take the example of Liberia on the continent. They brought these blacks, the sons of
so-called curios.
Yes, and brought them from America and dumped them.
That was a resettlement project.
Yeah, in Liberia. What happens? That those who came from America now assumed they were superior than those they found in Liberia.
It is an agenda.
Not they assumed.
It is
they were
agenda.
groomed to be
Yes.
that way.
Yes.
So that there are two classes of people.
Exactly.
And they have effectively done the colonizers' work.
Yeah.
Mututa, are you not aware, at the same time, here in Uganda, are you not aware, for instance, and this is very unfortunate, I even don't know where our Pan-African and patriotic credentials are. Are you not aware that here in Uganda, in the state in which we are, poor roads and what have you, we have got a group of people who think that they are more important, they are more human beings than you and me. They are here. They are in the public offices, they are in all these government parastatals. Somebody passes you, somebody behaves as if for him or her is more of a human being than yourself. And this is the problem. We start from here.
So,
why
are you saying these people in Uganda are also being supported by America?
Let me tell you.
Not directly, but you see, as you said, when they target key sectors or key tenants of an economy, and they make it, they make, for example, things such as scholarships available, or things such as fellowships available. The idea, these people are not being charitable. I know it's not a bad thing to earn a scholarship because of your brain power, but you have to know that that organization has an interest in entrenching its way of doing things. No wonder we have people who look like you and me who more vigorously pursue the white man's line than the white man himself.
Oh, yes.
But they're here.
Oh, yeah.
They studied in some of the most important universities in this world.
So they say.
And they have come looking and talking like you. But the agenda is definitely out of Washington directly.
Yeah, but of course,
unmitigated.
I think that they also, the other thing of this selfishness, this greed and self, it has killed us, the African people. We are actually not any better
like
than the whites, than another race. But I think we have a problem.
But you see, like you said,
race.
Ndugu Rugarama talked about we have an issue here in Uganda. But unfortunately for us, this dilemma is replicated from the south to the north, from the east to the west, where if this Wagner operation, it's a recent development.
Sure.
Okay, they are an extension of the Russian government, but they are not directly in the Russian bureaucracy. But for an outfit to have come to Africa in the last 10 years, they are totally unashamed. They are after oil, they are after gas, they are after diamonds, they are after gold, they are after copper. The operation is clear. They are not about who is ruling, and they are ruling well. They are not about medical care. They are about full-scale exploitation around the globe. They'll give you guns to keep you where you are. Then they'll exploit everything in the night. Now, if we have people who can work, and they say they are leaders, and they embrace people who have not tried to even hide their intention, at least the colonizer, the original, he tried to hide through religion. At least I'll give him credit. He tried to hide. These ones are not pretending. They don't have religion. They're atheists. These people, the Russians are atheists. They don't believe in God.
Yeah.
So they have no religion for you.
They're Orthodox Catholics.
A few.
Well, many of them don't believe in God.
They have no business with God.
But for them, they're not even pretending. For them, they are looters. Now, if anybody who occupies a high office in Africa can make an alliance with a man who is not hiding his intention to pillage, to destroy, to maim, and to kill.
And again, your point comes in very well when you look at this, the leadership of Africa, because if I become a leader, then my family, my tribe, my group, and those ones. And we have seen most, like now in Sudan, it has gone down. When what you see this rapid force is doing,
rapid response force.
They are also going tribal. They are also looking for particular people, those who have been enjoying their life, those who have particular classes, those who have been in government, those who have been in businesses, and these are the businesses that are destroying. They are also looking for groups, like most of this leadership, like I said, are coming from the other part of the country, which has been marginalized.
Villagers, they
yes,
call them.
and have been marginalized for long. They are now taking that as a revenge. And we have seen this happen in most of these countries in Africa where we have had conflict. We have seen it happen in Mali, we have seen it happen in Ethiopia. Exactly, we have seen it happen even in Liberia. I was talking about Liberia. That even when the Samuel Doe later on took over power in the 80s and overthrew the elite Americans, he also became a problem. You remember, he's the one who even he killed the president, he killed the cabinet, he killed his family, the family of the president, and then when he takes over power, he assumes now he flips.
That he has finished them.
Exactly, and then he goes back to his tribe that had been marginalized, and he looks for. So I think
he became a tribesman.
Yeah, he became also an idiot. But what happens here? I think there is the need to have the arrangement of leadership. I think people shouldn't just wake up in the morning and find themselves in leadership. Now, that would assume that the political systems...
Who brought them? They brought themselves.
Exactly. That's why we are saying maybe the political systems
maybe who
should
is sustaining them? Who brought them can be another debate. Who is sustaining? Anyway, in my opinion, really, I think this debate again throws us to what would have formed our second segment about some of these religious affiliations and, or for that matter, the differences within the regions and also classes of people, and what has been the role of the imperialists in them. We do reckon that the religions we have on the African continent, largely speaking, are not homegrown kind of religions. If we are talking about Christianity, whether it is Roman Catholic, whether it is Anglican, whether we are talking about Islam, whether we are talking about all these other manner, even including Pentecostal, by the way, faith now or movement, which is catching fire on the African continent, which is bringing the problems which you have just been showing us in, for instance, Kenya. We see what happened just not too long ago, talking about just a matter of days. We have been seeing in the rest of the African continent, here in Uganda, we witnessed the Kibwetere. So you reach a point when you look at the activities in Sudan.
As you wind up.
Yes, activities in Sudan, activities in the majority of Africa now. We have talked about Central African Republic. We have talked about where Libya can be another thing. We have talked about Niger. We have talked about Mali. We have talked, you know, apart from that colonial picture, the colonial times, which came with the religions, the different beliefs, Catholicism, Anglicanism, Islam, and what have you, created a situation whereby we kind of vacated our brains were preoccupied with the thinking that there was a superior body of knowledge which the white man had brought, and we stopped thinking. As Africans, I can tell you that majority of us stopped thinking.
Sure.
Now, when we did stop thinking, this is what happened. Somebody started thinking for us. Started thinking for us on how we should govern ourselves, started thinking for us on defining who this God was. And you see, these are major factors, by the way, because you will find that in the war in Sudan, as we talk about now, the undertones, the religious undertones, play a very big role.
Sure.
The differences in class, who you are, where you attend your education, your level of education, and how you live, the socioeconomic class in which you are all things that have been created right from the times of the colonial master, and they have been maintained through imperialism. And what imperialism does in its highest form of capitalism is to identify classes of people who are maintained at a certain level, and they look at others as lesser human beings. Now, if that can also be maintained in a religion, and they do maintain those differences within a religion, that if, for instance, you are a Catholic, you are an Anglican, you are a Muslim, your groupings, the way you are going to do business, the way you are going to organize trade will be around those differences in your faith, in your belief. Africa, largely, has been maintained in that situation whereby we can afford to kill each other. We can afford to destroy the little that has been built. We can afford to do away with our future. We give away our future through civil wars and all manner of trouble, which look, when you don't use high lenses to see who is actually behind all these troubles, you will imagine that actually the African person was created with a certain type of DNA, lesser than the rest of other races. And that is why we have got all these trouble. And we are not about to get out of that quagmire. But I want to conclude by saying, all is not lost.
Rachel.
The Sudan equation is an unfortunate confluence of complex factors that have come together at a time such as this one. We have a confluence of conflict between, like he was talking about, the elite who are represented by Burhan, and then the rural, the educated, the elite like Burhan, and then the semi-literate and so on. But we are talking about also the fact that greed is very much also part of the equation, not to talk about the mix of foreign interference. So the confluence of all these factors had to have come to such an end. Not necessarily now, but I think it was inevitable, given the fact that the true cause of these problems has never been visited.
Sure.
If this is the time to truly revisit the foundations of what is Sudan, so be it.
Maybe it's the time. And where's Bashir now?
That one is now a question that cannot easily be answered. Because did you know where he was in the first place?
Well, he was under house arrest. But I think he was unaccounted for. I don't know whether it was Burhan or Dagola who moved
had
him.
interest. That's Africa for you. Well, thank you so much, viewer, wherever you are and following us on this program. I know many people have sent in messages, but because of our time, we'll be not able to go through them now, but we'll start with them next week as we start the next program. But we thank you for the time that you have been with us. We are here because you follow us. We are here because you interact with us, and you also give us sometimes your views, which we share and have been very important in building this program. For now, we'll be leaving you until next week, when we shall meet again on Friday for the Pan-African Friday program. Until then, we say thank you and be safe for the weekend. Thank you.